Excellent. All right. Anyways, hi, I'm Steven, Steven James. So I just recently, a little bit about me, I just recently graduated with my master's degree in piano performance from the University of Oregon. And I've kind of studied composition on the side for a long time, and now I've decided that this is the direction that I'm going to go primarily, and piano will be they're going to switch as far as priorities or be more even. I'm really trying to carve out a path for myself as a composer performer. So playing my own music as a pianist or for chamber music, and then also using the connections that I made with my colleagues in the university program who in order to play some of my music as well. So that's been very, very nice. Um, yeah, so I just finished with my master's degree and I performed my master's recital at the end of May, and that included the piece that is on the program today, the sonata. And then I also finished my oral exam, which I talked about the recital program, including my sonata, and I also used this presentation for a theory class with Jack Boss. So
Okay.
that's been kind of the thing. Outside of no immediate musical activities, I'm also a writer. I got a minor in creative writing, and I do a lot of I like writing poetry, fiction stories. I run Dungeons and Dragons games for people too, which is a really fun way for me to kind of let the let the ideas just flow in a way that's not music. And then I also really love traveling and exploring. Like for instance, and sometimes I do very extensive drives just on the drop of a hat. Like for instance, last month I drove when we had the aurora that was visible here in Oregon. I drove 600 miles round trip uh, on a whim to go drive up to central Washington to get a better view. And then I came back and I wrote a piece about it. So it was a really wonderful experience. And my car ended up in the shop for 3 straight weeks afterwards from because it's an
Oops.
old thing with it's an old thing with 245,000 miles on it. So I had to fix a lot of things that
Mhm.
broke after that trip. That's how that goes. So at some point, I'm going to write a piece about all of the dashboard lights on my car and how much what the different special kind of anxiety that each one gives me. And me thinking about, okay, if it's the brakes, that's a $300 repair. If it's the head gasket, that's a $1,500
Yeah.
repair. If it's the
Yeah.
clutch, it's a $1,500 repair, plus I have to find someone who's willing to replace the clutch.
Yeah.
All right.
So
Driving a
so
stick. All right.
yes, I love stick. So anyways, that's me. I love adventures. I love exploring. What is the link to presentation? Sure, I can send you my PowerPoint on the Sonata. So anyways, let's jump into talking about the piece.
Okay.
And actually, I think I would like, if is there a way for me to send to attach a document? I
Well, you
can.
can put it in the chat and
Yeah,
we can download it from the chat.
cool. Let me do that then. Let me figure out. I need to make sure I have the most recent edition. Let's do this one. This one says final on it. So I'm gonna
Or
attach this.
is this
Uploading.
Yeah.
a manuscript? Because you can, if it's on your desktop, you can put it in the chat, in the
Yes.
not in the chat, but on the
Screen,
whiteboard.
yeah, the screen share.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's my plan. So I put the document, the file in the chat. So feel free to peruse it at your leisure as I'm talking about the piece. I'm also at the end going to share a video and recording that I made. And I'll talk more about that, but I made a video recording that scrolls with the score, so you can follow the score while as it's playing, which I find very convenient. Although you also have the you 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 also have the score there. So Anyways, so onto the piece. So this piece was really a turning point for me because when I was in high school and an undergrad, I dabbled in composition, but I was very focused on developing skill as a pianist. So composition, I never played any of my own pieces. I only ever heard them as computer MIDI realizations. So you can imagine how that is. And in this piece, I wrote it, and it was just another thing. But because I sat down one day, I was like, I want to try writing a piano sonata. I was a first term of my graduate degree as a pianist, and I decided I wanted to write a sonata. And it came in different sections. I wrote the first section and then couldn't figure out a good ending for it. And then I decided to write a second section to go with the first section. And then I thought, oh, well, now I can make a sort of a recap, and boom, sonata form-ish. But I'm going to talk about it because it ended up being a more complicated sonata form than probably what you find in theory textbooks. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Yeah, I wrote the piece and lived with it for a year, and then eventually I showed it to one of my piano professors, and he liked my piece, which was the first time that anyone had ever listened to something that I wrote and actually really appreciated it. And I was like, oh, maybe I should try doing more of this. So I started writing more. I also decided I wanted to play the thing. So I learned the piece over a very painful series of months and performed it in my recital. It's, as you'll notice from looking at the score or from the recording, it's a very complex, very technical piece with a lot of different layers to disentangle. I take a lot of influence from Medtner and Rachmaninoff and Prokofiev, so that kind of also translates into a very complicated piano style. But it was a lot of fun to play it in my recital and a lot of fun to record it. Now, I'm going to jump into the presentation part of this thing. So let me see if I can share the screen. Let me share the PowerPoint. And then let me switch to slideshow from beginning. Cool. Alrighty, so Sonata, do you guys see that all right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. So Sonata Dolorosa. Dolorosa comes from the Latin word for sorrow, which really, for me in this piece, influences a lot of the thing. It's about roughly 15 minutes long, and I based it around 3 short to medium length. You can think of them as leitmotifs, like a Wagner opera. So the original theme, I kind of call it the main character theme, is it's the one that kind of alternates between E major, or between E and then A flat. So I'm going to play a bit of this here. So that little theme there is the very beginning, and then it's put against what I kind of lifted the Fate theme, what I call the Fate motif from the Beethoven Sonata, Opus 111, which was the last one. I'm going to play a bit of the opening, so it sounds like. Yeah, and then it goes on. So, and then the last theme that I used with this was the Dies Irae, which is a very popular and shows up in everywhere, shows up in Berlioz and Liszt and Rachmaninoff. And John Williams uses it in the score for Star Wars, and it's in, I think, The Shining as well. So it's a very popular theme, kind of as a symbol of impending doom, which all 3 of those kind of tie together for thematically. The sonata for me deals with the feelings of isolation and fear during the pandemic. Which was, for me as a young person, I know that all of you have lived through quite a lot, probably quite a lot more than me, and yet for the pandemic for me was very, it was hard for me to deal with. So,
Hard for us too.
yeah, so this sonata kind of became a channel for that. So some theoretical context, some useful ideas. This is from my presentation for the theory class, but I think it's useful here too. There's a couple of theorists from the 20th century that had ideas that I find useful for describing the sonata, mainly Hegel's idea of becoming and the growth of ideas from an initial seed. So that's a Beethovenian idea that in Wagner and Brahms, and very German, very German traditional style of development. And then as well as Schenker's concept of scale step prolongation, embellishment, voice leading as methods of developing the theme and kind of filling in the gaps between structural notes of the melody. And Schoenberg's Fundamentals of Music Composition also is very helpful for describing this with his, how he talks about a main idea and developing variation, which is very much how I develop a lot of the themes in this piece. And as far as the large scale form of the piece, you can probably find the most similarities to Liszt's B minor sonata and Schoenberg's First Chamber Symphony, both of which use the double function sonata form, which essentially creates a smaller form within a bigger form of a mini sonata that's like a movement that is monothematic, contrasted with a second movement that adds a contrasting theme, and then at the end in the third movement recapitulating the first theme. So it creates a very large sonata form, and that's the double function form. So I'm going to talk a bit about I'm going to focus mostly on the exposition of the sonata. So the first 6 or 7 minutes of the piece. I'm going to talk about the thematic development. I'm going to talk about how I use harmony. Specifically, this piece is built around the very beginning has I go from an augmented chord, or actually this is just an enharmonically written E major chord. Which goes to a second inversion A flat minor. Which goes to a diminished chord. And then which goes to the contrast there between A flat major and E major, if you combine those, you get an augmented chord, which is what creates most of the harmonic tension throughout the whole piece. So the main character theme here, I already played it, but I'm going to play it again, which I kind of extrapolate here. We have the pedal point E natural and chromatic notes filling in the structure. If you listen to this ascending chromatic line. Very Schenkerian way of looking at that. And then I also talked about the fate motive from the beginning, which has a couple different variations that I use throughout the piece. And I already commented on the original from the Beethoven Sonata. Now here's the score from the beginning, and it shows how I add the dies irae as a counter subject. And that's a very important aspect of this piece is the counterpoint. I actually have a full-blown fugue that I use as part of the retransition in the first movement. So, and always the dies irae is there as a counter subject. It almost never appears as the main melody itself. There's only a very few occasions. Usually it's always in the background. And it's always interwoven with the other thematic ideas. And actually, in this beginning, I weave kind of all three themes together. And you notice here at the end, I have that circled in green ink. So that's how I interweave the fate theme with the other themes, and I tack it onto the end of the dies irae. Now, talking about the developing variation, this section here is kind of the extrapolation of new material based on the structure of already discussed thematic seeds. For instance, there are many instances of development of the main character theme, the most important motive of the sonata. For instance, in this section, a little bit later on, this is a development of the kind of inversion of the EDSA of the Fate theme. You can hear. And then later, and then next section we combine it with. You get the idea in the bass line. You can hear that connected to. Now, moving on, we move to the next section, which has the same pulse, but now is 1 to the bar, because I wanted to switch to non-tuplets, nine tuplets, and it would have been really awkward to write the whole next section with 9 tuplets, so I made it double. I notated everything at double speed, and in this kind of this idea here. So that is, once again, a more development of the main character theme. And then lastly, the climax of this development section really shortens everything, compresses it for a very, it compresses everything for a very, as we build towards the climax. Let me see if I think I can, I should be able to play this. I haven't practiced it yet today, but that's fine. You get the idea. It's a very compressed, like leaving out a lot of the inner notes of the it's a development of the development of the development, leaving out a lot of notes to really compress it all for a dramatic build-up. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the harmony and the voice leading in the sonata. The introduction uses what you would call parsimonious voice leading, mainly in the bass line, keeping the A flat the same. And we get the E descends to E flat, descends to D. And in the form of the sonata, this is represented by the different sections that are developed. The first section develops this augmented chord and E major. And then the second section develops A flat and A flat major and minor, which we'll talk about soon. And then the third section, before we get to the recap, is much more built on diminished chords. So this first 6 measures forms what is a template for the rest of the sonata. Now, I also use harmonically, this is sort of a tonal piece, as in it still is goal-oriented in a classical sense of being, like it's goal-oriented being that it does have a tendency to move towards functional harmony. That said, I really tried my hardest to avoid cadences whenever possible. For instance, in this climactic section of the first movement, okay, we're here. This is a dominant chord that we would expect to go to E flat. Except that since we're right at the beginning of the piece, I see no reason for a cadence. So we just stay in second inversion, and then bass line ascends chromatically, and what it turns into is a deceptive cadence with some extra steps. And in a lot of cases, these sorts of moments sound cadential because of the melody, and we get, say, a resolution upwards by half step. For instance, here, this section, let me just flip back to this on my score. This sounds very much like a cadence, except that the bass line is Dies Irae and goes to E flat, which is a third relation and not at all a cadence, unless you count resolving by a minor third as a cadence, which it never is. So it gives the illusion of bass movement without actually being a movement. Now this happens again, the section that I played earlier, and you can see here the passage which goes from the non-tuplets to the triplets. We get it just kind of goes to it goes back to A flat, but the bass once again just jumps to not random place. It's not random, but it is not a cadence. So, and actually I end this whole section, this whole climactic first movement ends on a half cadence. And it's just all this big dramatic buildup. Let me play a little bit of this here. I think I can, so just... We get this dominant second inversion, which in the next part goes up to F flat, which is once again a descendant cadence. So we've now gone 7 minutes into the piece without a true cadence, but a lot of almost cadences. So, and that is how I create the form of the sonata, by constantly pushing out any sort of resolution, which is why I needed the double function sonata form. And the idea is that we don't get a resolution in the home key until we get to the recap. And that's and I stretch it out through the whole piece to make that as impactful as possible. Now, the main character motive makes up theme A of the sonata, which, let me recap for those who may not know sonata form. The idea of sonata form is that you have the classical sonata, is that you have the introductory, like you have an introduction, and then you have the theme of the sonata, the main musical idea, and then a transition, and that transition takes you out of your home key. And you have theme B, which is in a different key. In a classical sonata, say by Mozart or Haydn or Beethoven, it'll be either in relative minor or in the dominant key, or parallel minor or parallel major. It's usually in a related key. And in this case of the sonata, it actually is in a related key, but in this case the relation is by thirds, because the opening is in sort of E major, F minor territory, and then the second theme, which I'll talk about soon, goes from F flat to A flat minor to D major to A flat major. And A flat major is where we land, and I'm going to talk about the second theme. It's and the second theme here, which is built off of the faint motive. Much more pensive and dark. But you can still hear little fragments of the main character idea. But developed, not quite the same. And then we get this, and then I do this transition. Into what is the first truly contrasting theme of this sonata. Anyways, you get this idea. It's built off of thirds. It's built off of thirds and kind of distantly related to the, if you can imagine, which is here. If you imagine it just inverting that, that's how it's a very small connection. It really feels more of a secondary theme, the first true second theme of the sonata. And this whole section is really built on this second inversion tonic chord, which, if you remember from the opening, that second inversion chord is once again here, but now in A major instead. Now, the recapitulation of the B theme is very naked and slower and more dramatic. And this is actually the section that I referred to earlier about being a very built on diminished chords. And you look at the key signature here, it uses it's A flat minor. And I'm actually going to jump to the third measure on your page. What you hear here is this is actually, we're moving towards, which is a fully diminished chord here. And then again, a little bit later here. This whole section, which is very slow, is very much, the diminished chord is very important with this, which fulfills the third section of the introduction. That said, I'm going to talk a little bit about the second theme a little bit more, because that second theme forms what in music theory we call a ternary form. But it's really more of a modified ternary, because we have the transition when we have this, which is just the fade theme. That's really the beginning of the B theme. And then we have a transition to the second part of the ternary. And then back to this, which is once again built on the same material, but it's a modified, it's a variation. And a very free variation at that. So the end of the B theme begins to retransition into the recap and climax of the sonata, which is more of a paraphrase of the A theme, using a shortened recapitulation. I don't recap. Now, here's the thing, is that in sonata form, in a lot of classical sonatas, you would talk through the whole second thing. You would introduce the first theme, the second theme, development, and then do the recapitulation, which involves recapping the first theme and the second theme. In this case, the development of the sonata is spread throughout the movement, or it's spread throughout the piece rather than being a specific development section. There are more periods of development that intersperse between the thematic ideas. So I saw, for the form, it being much more appropriate to only recap the A theme, which is just a shortened recap. And I found that much more appropriate for the sonata. And this whole section here is meant to be the climax of the whole piece. Now, notice that this is not a literal recapitulation, but a reimagining of the original material in a way that makes more narrative sense for the piece. Now, the fate motive is integrated into the texture of the main character theme, and we also get the dies irae at the very end, which is a very kind of bringing us in. Now, also here, this whole section plays around a lot with the augmented chords, which goes to the second inversion, which goes, instead of going back to the diminished chord, it goes to the dominant chord, which, as you can see, I have circled here in red. This is a very important moment in the sonata because we stay on this dominant chord. Instead of wandering off again, we get true hints of E flat major. Although in this case, we get some of the diminished too. Like we get the minor ninth, or I guess you could say the augmented octave. But, which wants to resolve to right here at the end. Or in this case, A flat major. So, and we get there through dies irae. Sorry. And that's going to land us right on back on the home key, A flat, which is where we started by being kind of ambiguously almost there, but not quite, because it's actually an augmented harmony. So the whole sonata is really about resolving E major to E flat. or maybe reinterpreting F flat, which is that we have at the end, and that resolves upwards. So this whole sonata is built around that, the cadence of E major going to A flat major. Anyways, that's the part of the, okay, I'm going to stop sharing. That's the part of my presentation that has the PowerPoint. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the process of learning the piece and performing it. So from a pianistic perspective, there's a lot of different challenges that came with the piece, mainly with some of the passages are fairly virtuosic. I'll just talk a bit through some of them and some of the challenges of recording the thing, because I recorded it actually this last weekend. I sat down and made tried to make a decent recording that didn't have too many slip-ups or whatever, too many little accidental things. I tried to sit down and make a clean recording of it on the Bosendorfer at the U of O School of Music, which I especially requested to have opened for me. So I sat down and did some recordings of that, and some of the challenges I found right away is that the Bosendorfer has a very full and beautiful sound, which is wonderful, which is why I picked it for this piece. However, it also means that the very fast passages can get muddy very quickly. And I recorded some sections 10 times, 15 times, trying to get it clarity. And I think I was on my 10th or 11th take of a particular section before it dawned on me that maybe using less pedal, like no pedal whatsoever, would be enough to help sort through a lot of the very dense layers. So that was one of the main challenges here, especially when the piece has a lot of very complex layers of counterpoint and lines and moving lines that need to be shown. I would also say in this section there's a lot of double notes and some expansions on passages that on techniques that you might find in some earlier romantic music, let's say Chopin. For instance, this section, the that passage there is not so different from the Chopin, from the figuration in the Chopin Third Ballade, which just kind of rocks back and forth between octaves. However, what Chopin only does very, very little in that is add chords in the middle of that. He does it a little bit. He adds a little bit, but I take it a step further with adding a lot of the augmented harmonies and sometimes even adding two chords at the same time, one in each register. So like for instance here, this is the augmented chord which goes to here, the diminished chord. You can hear me moving very quickly between different harmonic groups, which is very hard to process at first, because if you're a pianist trained in the classical romantic repertoire, usually harmony doesn't move that quickly. And it's still harmony, it's not like Schoenberg 12-tone music, which kind of the harmony comes from the set, the serialism. In this case, it still needs to be considered and treated as functional harmony, which makes it extra hard because it has to be all very clear. So that was quite a challenge to play. And then there was also the technical problem that I created for myself and someone regretted, because there's a quote from Prokofiev writing in a letter about his third piano concerto saying, "Why did I write this? This was so hard." and of course he played it, and it's a brilliant piece. And that piece is even more difficult than this sonata, I would say. But this section here is very hard to keep clear because it's just so dense. It reminds me a lot of the Rachmaninoff cello sonata, which is a very tough piece that I've performed once because my hands are not big enough for that piece. Like I can only reach maybe a ninth. And this piece doesn't actually ask a pianist to reach more than a ninth, because why would I at least I'm not that stupid. I would not ever write something that I physically can't play. I would only write something that I mentally can't play. So, anyways, moving on from that, then the next passage was the fugue, which I didn't really talk a lot about in the presentation, but the fugue theme is once again a development of the original idea, but inverted and backwards, and then forwards. And phrasing this, I spent a lot of time discussing this with one of my teachers about how I should phrase this, and finding different ways. And it's funny because every person that I talked to, every pianist that I showed this to had a different way of doing it, which is what makes me very happy, but also makes me very self-conscious about how I do it, because maybe the way that I do it is not as good as how other people do it. I mean, professional, full-blown concert pianists with a full-on career that I've been teaching for 30 years will probably play my own piece better than me, which I'm fine with. That's an open advertisement for anyone who wants to play my piece. Anyhow, and then from there, that's one technique I used a lot in this piece. I'm going to actually move this down so you can see what I've been playing a little bit more. I realized that camera angle was bad. Was one of the main challenges in this piece was rapidly jumping between octaves. And that's a very thorny thing to do at speed. Very hard to keep it clear. And I think even if you listen very carefully in the recording at certain parts, you'll notice that I maybe I catch a couple of wrong notes here and there. I try. Anyways, and then this section here, the second theme, which I played a little bit of before, is very, very brilliant. And initially, it's not hard to play. It's not hard to play the first section. The first three lines or so are not hard. It gets hard after about 6 lines. When you get to the second page, it gets hard because it's a lot of movement for the hands. It's a very, very dense line. So that I found myself having to record this more than I would have liked, based on how easy it seemed for me to play. I know easy is relative, but I wrote it so it fits in the hands quite well. But this revealed to me all my technical problems that I still have, in that I was getting tense. But eventually I figured out how to play this and get through it decently well. And then, of course, the last section, which I did not play for you yet, because I remember writing this and thinking, okay, I'm going to have to practice this a lot, but I don't care because it's what I want in the piece, which is a very kind of Lisztian transcendental sort of texture with octaves and different registers at the same time. So you get the idea, and I didn't do it super well just now, but it's a lot of moving around and managing things that are very, very dense. And that kind of encapsulates the main challenges that came from recording the piece. And so now that I've talked about all of this, I'd like to share the full recording that I've made, as well as the score. So let me share.
What question?
Yes.
Have you ever gotten Alexandre Dossin to play this or play parts of it?
Not yet.
He's any interest in it?
He's my teacher. He's been my teacher.
Yeah, well,
for 6
that's why I
years.
asked. I read that in your bio. I haven't. I just met him once, like many years ago. So I'm not saying I know him at all, but I was just curious.
I'm hoping that he'll play it eventually. It would very much fit his style. He would play the heck out of it. So, but he'll get to it one day, I'm sure.
Hope so.
I think he will. So now let me share the full recording of this.
Great.
Now, I wasn't able to hear the recording, but I'm going off of faith that you guys could hear it, so... Are you guys able to hear it?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. I can hear it as well. I knew it would fix itself. There you go.
Oh, wonderful.
So questions? Comments?
Congratulations for writing from the heart and not simplifying it. Really, really. And I think probably all of us can relate to the pandemic if we want to, but it's beautiful. It's a wonderful piece.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
I wanted to dance.
Yeah, it's really hard to play. Congratulations. It's
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
really
Yes,
hard work.
yeah, you said you didn't have good technique. Well, you have pretty good technique to be able to play.
Well, yeah, but if Marc-Andre Hamelin played it, you know.
Oh, well,
But yeah, I just do my best.
like my PR teachers say, there's always going to be someone better. Don't worry about them. Just do it.
Yeah, you really pushed yourself to the edge there.
Yeah. Wow.
That's great. That's great. Never a dull moment,
That's good.
Right.
really.
I liked your explanation, and uh, I love music theory, so I just really watched and listened for everything that you presented. I really, really liked it. I liked what you did with the fugue.
Thanks.
Well, all of it, but it's great.
Any questions about yeah?
So the fugue, I got confused. I understood you to say that the fugue was retransition back to the recapitulation, but it looks like it's actually leading into the middle part of your compound. I forget what you call it now.
Double
Your
function form.
compound sonata form.
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. That makes sense. I understand. I see the confusion here. It's like imagine kind of what happens here after the fugue happens, right?
Come up with, yeah.
Like this section here is sort of the reappearance of that main theme. That's why I was calling it's a miniature recap.
Oh, I see.
It's sort of a recap, but it's not the big R recap.
Right.
It's more like a mini recap. So it's leading back from the climactic section, you know, that ends with the DSC, right?
I see.
Yeah. So it's if you think about if you know the Liszt B minor sonata at all, he does the same thing with the
I don't know it
fugato.
that well.
Okay.
It's been a while.
But well, he uses a fugato to retransition back to, because he ends the slow movement and then he turns the devil theme from that piece into which I don't have memorized, otherwise I would play it. Maybe I have the score around, but that's not important. Anyway, he turns the devil theme from that piece into a fugato, and the fugato builds a bunch of energy and leads into the recap. So that's sort of my intention here, except it ended up leading into not the actual recap, but more the early intermediate miniature recap. So
okay. And then this is the middle, sort of the middle form. I can't think of what you called it now. It wasn't compound sonata form.
The double function sonata.
Double function. So the page 11 is where the middle part of that begins, right? Am I correct?
You are correct. That's where the middle begins.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, page 11 is right where where the second section starts.
Yeah. Okay. I got all that.
Okay.
Yes. It functions as a slow movement, or like you were saying, ternary form, middle movement, but yet, you know, you're using all the same thematic material, or a lot of the same thematic material, and yet in it has also very different characters. These things come back in very different emotional characters in different parts of the piece, which is also a very Lisztian kind of thing to do.
Yes, I will say I've played a lot of Liszt in my
Yeah.
life. Because Alex Dossin has the Liszt festival that he does every year.
Oh, uh-huh. Yeah.
So I've been with him for 6 years, and I played in 5 of them. So a lot of Liszt, including the actually, it's really funny, the second sonnet from his Italy Year of Pilgrimage actually also explores the augmented relationship between E major and A flat major, and that's really funny because I realized now I was playing that piece in the like preparing for competitions and stuff, and I was playing that piece, and then I wrote the sonata. So that's probably where that key relationship came from in the first place.
But he didn't patent it. You know, anybody can use it.
Yeah. Anyways,
Have you worked on I think it's called Il Sposalizio?
I've read through it. I haven't performed
the
it.
the one that Debussy must have known because of.
Is that from the arabesque?
Yeah, it's ripped off right out of the Liszt Sposalizio.
I never noticed that before, but that's amazing.
Check it out.
I'm going to point that out now to everyone.
Check it out.
That's
of course,
great.
And Wagner stole some stuff. I think Bells out of Bells of Geneva.
That also makes sense.
I'm a terrible singer. Anyway,
me too.
I'm getting off the track. Sorry, it's your presentation.
Well, I mean, I'm mostly done. This is all the content that I have.
Okay,
So,
well, that's quite spectacular, I have to say.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Well, just a wonderful accomplishment, Stephen. Really, it's quite a tour de force.
Yes.
Being a non-keyboard person, I'm very impressed. I'm an oboist, so I've always marveled at all those notes that pianists can play. But anyway,
well, I'm a middling keyboard person, and I'm pretty damned impressed too.
yeah, no, it's
Well, anyways, thank you guys for having me.
I'm curious, what notation system did you use? Was that Sibelius?
Finale.
Oh, that was Finale. Oh, okay.
Yes.
Stephen, just a curious thing. How do you, for the playback, how do you do the score coordination with the performance?
Oh, okay. So let me tell you what I did here. So I went through, and so I recorded everything, made a track, and then I went and took screenshots using the snipping tool to take screenshots of the score, the digital PDF, a couple like lines at a time, and then I used Adobe Premiere, which is my software that I use for making videos. Very easy to use, kind of expensive, but I use an old version. And I just put the different screenshots as far as where they are in the music and synchronize it all. So actually, I was worried. Yeah.
So is there a timing function that you, or a cue that comes up to turn the page, as it were?
Well, I have it, basically the way it works in Adobe Premiere is you have the score, or you have the image of those couple of, like, that page, and then you can set it for a certain amount of time, and you want to synchronize the end of that and the start of the next one with the place where it changes to the next line in the piece. Does that make sense?
iMovie has something like that, but it's so difficult to use. It's just craziness.
Maybe that's another presentation. Maybe I can explain how to. At some point, I can talk about how to do this, or I'll think about that.
Okay.
Because, actually.
Well, I mean, is there something in Adobe Premiere? Does it, quote unquote, listen for a cue to change to the next screenshot?
No, I set it manually myself.
Okay.
It's timing.
Yeah, you can set it manually yourself based off of just listening to it and following the music.
Yeah.
So could you do the same in PowerPoint?
No, because the Adobe Premiere, what Adobe does is it lets you set, it gives you the timeline, like kind of a master timeline, and you have one read part of that timeline is for the audio, the track, the music, and then the other part of that is for the visual. And actually, there's functions that I haven't experimented with where you can actually put different visuals and different audios together. I saw no reason to do that for this piece, so I just took the audio and then I took the video and I just put the screenshots here. The first screenshot is there for 3 seconds from the start to 3 seconds in, and then the second screenshot is from 3 seconds in to 10 seconds in, and then the next screenshot's from 10 seconds to 15 or whatever. And I pick the timing based off of where it needs to turn.
So you have to go through the piece and time each section.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It took me about 30 to 45 minutes to do that. So it's a bit of work, but it's not too bad. I assume it would be much worse if you have a long piece.
Yeah.
It would be almost as bad as writing parts for an orchestra.
Yeah. Now, do you happen to know Don Freund, who's a composer friend of mine back in Indiana? He has these scrolling scores, and does those work in a similar way?
No. I don't know how to do that, to be honest. However, I would guess, if I were to do that, I would use a different app, entirely a different notation app called MuseScore, which then lets you scroll through it. And what I would do then is I would publish, with MuseScore actually has a functionality where in the app you can publish the scrolling score, and you can actually publish the scrolling score as a YouTube video, and then if you want, you can actually add your own audio instead of the computer-generated audio, which is very convenient. That's how you create the scrolling score.
Okay.
I think. I don't know if that's how he does it. That's how I would do it.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
oh, I'm sorry. Adam Eason does a good job with doing that, and he explained that to me several years ago. I gave up. I just thought you said it took you a long time, what, 20 to 30 minutes? It would take me hours, 20 to 30 hours.
Well, that doesn't count all the time that I spent in Finale trying to figure out how to do different things. Because I was a MuseScore guy for a long time, and then I switched over to Finale when David Crumb started bugging me to switch to Finale. So I did, and when I did, I had a piece of mine got read by the UO Symphony in March, and preparing the score for that and all the parts took so long because I had to go and look up how to do everything, how to do string divisie, string divisie. It took me so long to figure out how to do that in Finale, and let alone figure out what I wanted for the orchestration. But that was a lot of so figuring out Finale, I understand the taking hours to figure it out. But then once you get it the first time, it starts to click a little bit. So
This is a little off topic, but do you hear much buzz about Dorico down at UFO?
Yes, I know a lot of people who use Dorico. I've thought about getting it, but I spent $100 and something on Finale, and
yeah. None of them are cheap.
Yeah, I'm going to switch. I mean, eventually, here's my plan: is if I start needing to use VSTs, or I guess more advanced audio like realizations of orchestras without it being performed, and I need to be able to make really complicated mock-ups, then I'll probably get Dorico and use Dorico, because Dorico has better functionality as far as pairing it with something like BBC Radio Orchestra or Spitfire, which I think is really hard to do with Finale.
Yeah.
I'm actually still using Sibelius, but I keep meaning to change to Dorico any moment now for the last year or two.
I gave up on Finale. I used to teach my students how to use Finale, and then when I did my graduate work and everyone used Sibelius, and I thought, I'm not going to waste my time with that. And I had a demonstration. I mean, it was just like one stroke in Sibelius was 5 in Finale. I'm sold. No more. But I haven't done Dorico. But the sound, that's the problem.
Have you used Note Performer with Finale?
I do, yes.
Yeah.
And it sounds so much better with orchestra than it does with chamber music.
Yeah.
Like I have a piano trio that actually two piano trios, and I exported the videos for those and sent them to people, and every time I listen to it, I'm always like, the violin sounds horrible in this.
Yeah.
So the strings sound so bad. But then when you make the whole string section, a whole string section in an orchestra track, that sounds a lot better. So
Yeah, I'm using Note Performer with Sibelius, and it's quite smooth.
yeah.
I've heard of that. I haven't tried that. But do any of you use mock-ups? I've been hearing so many people that use mock-ups, or is that mostly for like screenwriting or something?
Oh, I think mock-ups are what people do when they put it in something called Logic, which is a different. Logic is a completely different system. It's not sheet music based notation. I think you use a keyboard to input it from using MIDI, and that I think that mock-ups usually have much better, much higher quality of sound, but it's also, in my experience, really hard. I haven't messed around yet with how to transition a score into a Logic Pro mock-up. Although maybe there's a way to do that. I haven't investigated that yet.
One needs to go down to California and work with the rangers and stuff down there. They've
Yes.
got this down to a science. I watch quite a few of the ASMAC presentations, and some of these things that these guys do is just incredible.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to tell that it's not done with a live orchestra.
Yeah.
I have to take off. Thank you for a fascinating presentation, Stephen.
Thank you.
And,
Congratulations.
Yes,
will-
thank you so much, Steve.
See you folks later.
Yeah.
Okay, bye-bye. And
Thank you. Alrighty.
Well, listen, congratulations again.
Yeah,
Really enjoyed it.
Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
glad.
Liz, thank you for organizing, and Greg, thank you for facilitating.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, thanks, Greg.
Yeah. Stephen, say hello to both David and Jack Boss. I know them both well, but Jack Boss I worked with many years ago back at Ball State when he was when I was director of the School of Music there. So I've known him for many years. But say hi and also to David too. that I
Yes.
know.
Alrighty. Well, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Good night.
Thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate the opportunity to go and talk about what I love. So,
Oh, and I'm glad you did it. I'm
Great-
glad it's all
great
worked
work.
out. Okay. Bye-bye.
alrighty. Bye bye.